My name is Sarah Morgan. I am 32 years old, a data analyst who has built her life around prediction, forecasting risk, preventing loss, calculating the odds of human error. But no algorithm warned me about my husband. For 5 years, Michael and I looked flawless from the outside. Seattle skyline condo, joint accounts, synchronized calendars. But even perfection leaves traces when it breaks. The first clue was a GPS route that didn't match his calendar. The second was a hotel receipt that didn't belong in ours. Numbers never lie. People do, and his data told me everything. If you want to see how a data analyst turns betrayal into evidence and transforms heartbreak into a perfectly executed case file, keep watching. The real receipts are coming. He thought he'd mastered control, but control is just a system until someone understands it better. I didn't confront him. I audited him. Every mile he drove, every dollar he hid, every secret he logged became the dataset of his own undoing. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the numbers. The dashboard of our smart home, usually so sterile and obedient, had turned into a confession booth. Every time the car left the garage, every time a light flickered in the living room when he wasn't home, it whispered a truth I hadn't wanted to hear. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, a misread log, a technical glitch, but deep down I knew the system was never wrong. I had built it. I had coded the monitoring algorithm that tracked our daily patterns. When a pattern breaks, it's never by accident. Michael was asleep beside me when I opened my laptop. The glow illuminated his face, peaceful, ordinary, deceptive. I logged into our car's data system. The trip history was immaculate until I zoomed in on a single route. Thursday, 9:17 p.m., departure Seattle, destination 23 miles south, duration 58 minutes. I layered the map with our credit card statement, and there it was again. The Granary Hotel, a name that felt suddenly radioactive. 2 data points don't make a trend, but 3 do. I opened the next week. Same time, same location. That was when the noise in my head stopped, replaced by a quiet calculation. This wasn't a moment for emotion. It was analysis. Every instinct in me wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand an explanation. But I'd spent too many years quantifying outcomes to know what emotional reactions cost. They destroy evidence. They give control back to the liar. And I had no intention of losing control. The next morning, I behaved as though nothing had changed. I made coffee, packed his lunch, listened as he spoke about a client presentation. His tone was confident, self-assured, rehearsed. When he kissed my cheek before leaving, I almost laughed. Data doesn't kiss. It records. As soon as the door closed, I walked into my office and began compiling a folder named Anomalies, Domestic. Inside it, I placed screenshots, expense receipts, and route logs. For the first time in our marriage, I felt grounded, not in love, but in proof. Over the following days, the pattern repeated. Thursday nights became red flag nights. I learned to predict the sound of betrayal, the soft click of the garage, the distant hum of tires fading into the city. Each time he left, I noted the time, the temperature, even the weather. I wasn't just documenting, I was building a model. By the end of the month, my spreadsheet had 36 variables and one conclusion. The more evidence I gathered, the calmer I became. Emotion had turned into precision. He wasn't a mystery anymore. He was a dataset, and datasets can be dismantled. I discovered the hotel charges disguised as client hospitality. I traced them through expense management logs he thought I couldn't access. I even found a digital receipt for champagne for 2, billed to a corporate account under an alias that matched none of his projects. That night, while he showered, I stood at the bathroom doorway and looked at the condensation on the mirror. 2 blurred silhouettes, one certain, one dissolving. I realized I wasn't looking at us anymore. I was looking at a before and after. He called out something casual. "Did you grab the towels?" And I answered evenly, "Already did." My voice didn't tremble because truth, once known, doesn't need volume. Later, when he fell asleep, I accessed our smart home's audio backup again. I listened to the faint recordings from the garage, filtering the static through my analysis software. A woman's laugh broke through the distortion, light and close. Then his voice, "Next week, same time." I hit replay again and again until the words became mechanical. They didn't hurt anymore. They verified. The next morning, I walked into work as if nothing had changed. My colleagues saw focus. They didn't see the fire underneath. During lunch, I wrote a note to myself in my phone. Collect data before confrontation. Truth has timestamps. That note became my mantra. When I returned home that evening, Michael was already there, smiling, casual, asking about my day. I smiled back, calm and composed, because calm is the weapon liars never expect. He poured wine, handed me a glass, and said, "To stability." I raised mine and answered, "To transparency." He laughed, oblivious. In that moment, I knew I wouldn't confront him that night or the next. I'd wait until the dataset was complete. Because confrontation is chaos. Evidence is finality. And when the time came, I wouldn't just accuse him. I'd prove him to himself. After the second week of data collection, I understood that silence was my greatest ally. Michael's confidence grew as mine sharpened. He believed routine was invisibility, that predictability would keep him safe. But I knew patterns expose more than they protect. Each morning he left the condo at 7:30, kissed my forehead, and drove toward what he claimed was an off-site client session. Each morning the GPS log confirmed he drove 5 miles in the opposite direction. I stopped asking questions. Questions alert suspects. Observation traps them. On Friday, I called in a favor from a colleague in cyber risk compliance, a discreet man named Drew who owed me a quiet debt. I asked him for an investigator who specialized in data-based infidelity cases. He didn't even blink. "You'll want Reese," he said. "He's methodical." That evening, while Michael was out, I met Reese in a coffee shop across from the harbor. He was a former digital forensics consultant, polite but clinical. I handed him a flash drive and a sealed envelope of my compiled data. He scrolled through the logs on his tablet, nodding slowly. "You've already done most of the work," he said. "All I need is your permission to monitor his financial cloud backup and device metadata. Nothing invasive, all legal." I gave him a single word: proceed. The next 72 hours moved like code compiling, silent, deliberate, inevitable. While Michael prepared for what he called a corporate retreat, Reese fed me findings. Photos from hotel parking cameras, receipts from an alias card tied to Michael's secondary consulting license, a registration form listing 2 guests. The woman's name was Evelyn Ross, blonde, 29, marketing associate from his firm. The file included an image, Michael holding the hotel door open for her, smiling the same measured smile he'd perfected for years. My chest didn't ache. It calculated. When Reese delivered the dossier, I spent an entire night reviewing it in chronological order, not for emotional closure but for logical precision. Betrayal is not chaos when you quantify it. It is a sequence of actions executed with intent. Each receipt, each timestamp, each unauthorized route formed the proof of motive. By dawn, I had created a 10-page report titled Behavioral Pattern. Michael Morgan, Variance from Baseline Trust Index. It read less like heartbreak and more like litigation. Step 1. Secure assets. The condo and the trust fund were jointly managed, but his attention to detail worked in my favor. He had once insisted we include a contingency clause allowing either partner to transfer funds in emergencies. I printed it, highlighted it, and called our bank's legal desk. "It's a data security precaution," I said smoothly. Within 48 hours, my private account held everything that mattered. Step 2. Shadow monitoring. Using administrative access to the smart home system, I created a hidden secondary user profile. Every time he entered a room, every time his phone connected to the Wi-Fi, a silent log was generated and mirrored to my external drive. No sound, no light, just data flow. Step 3. Evidence preservation. I printed duplicates of every receipt and stored them in waterproof sleeves in a file labeled Risk Containment. Digital copies went to an encrypted cloud under an alias he couldn't trace. Step 4. Legal consultation. I met attorney Lydia Graham in a dim downtown office filled with glass and quiet confidence. She listened without interruption as I laid out my findings. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "You realize you've built an airtight portfolio?" I nodded. She smiled faintly. "Then let's make it official. Step 5. Trigger preparation." I didn't want a dramatic confrontation. I wanted inevitability. Lydia and I set a timeline. 2 weeks to finalize filings, 1 week for service. Reese would monitor communication between Michael and Evelyn to capture any incriminating dialogue about finances. My role was to act normal. It was strangely the easiest part. In those 2 weeks, the condo felt like a stage built for deceit. Michael moved around it, unaware that every motion, every phrase, every sigh was being logged somewhere beyond his reach. I began to notice micro-expressions, the twitch near his temple when he lied, the way his eyes flickered right before mentioning late meetings. Lies have physical signatures. At night, I sat in my office listening to the hum of the city and the quiet breath of the machines that had become my allies. Data streamed in steady lines across my screen, neutral, faithful, incapable of manipulation. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. There is serenity in certainty. When the call came from Reese, "He's booked the granary again Thursday night. 2 guests, same room." I felt nothing but readiness. The model had reached its final iteration. The variables were solved. All that remained was execution. The night it all began to unravel felt deceptively ordinary. Seattle rain slid down the glass like clockwork data points. The city lights diffused through fog. Michael stood by the mirror adjusting his tie, rehearsing his reflection the way an actor memorizes lines. "Client dinner downtown?" he said. His phone chimed once, and for the first time I noticed he didn't glance at the screen. He already knew who it was. I answered with a smile that reached nowhere near my eyes. "Good luck," I said, and he kissed my cheek without meeting my gaze. When the elevator doors closed behind him, the condo exhaled. I walked to my office, powered on the monitors, and opened the live GPS feed. His car left the garage at 7:18 p.m., merged onto the freeway, and traveled exactly 23 miles south to the Granary Hotel. The timestamp aligned perfectly with his previous patterns. Routine is a beautiful thing. It predicts its own collapse. I sipped coffee gone cold and waited for Reese's update. At 8:06 he texted, 2 subjects arrived. "Same room as before? Confirmed overnight booking." I responded with a single word, logged. That one word was more than confirmation. It was initiation. I opened the secure drive labeled Phase 2. Inside were 3 folders: financial, legal, and personal. Each contained a sequence of triggers designed to activate in order. No emotion, only automation. Step 1. Asset transfer. A pre-scheduled bank instruction executed at 8:10 p.m., moving the remaining joint funds into my trust account under emergency authorization code. Step 2. Access lock. The condo's digital locks updated to new credentials, revoking Michael's biometric access. Step 3. Data capture. Every device synchronized with a hidden routine that mirrored its contents to my private cloud. Texts, photos, backups. The process ran quietly. Invisible. Perfect. At 10:41 p.m., Reese called. "He's leaving the hotel alone. She's still inside. Looks nervous." "He'll come home to pack," I said. "He thinks tonight is his clean break." I stood by the window, watching headlights smear across wet asphalt. The skyline shimmered in reflection, split by raindrops like fractured code. When his car entered the garage, the camera blinked. He stepped out, duffel bag over his shoulder. Face calm in the way only liars achieve when they think the plan has worked. He walked straight into the study, unlocked the desk drawer, and retrieved the envelope labeled Trust Fund Documentation, the same envelope I had replaced 3 days earlier with revoked copies. I could see his hands tremble slightly as he counted the pages. He smiled, folded them, and slipped the envelope into his bag. He didn't know that each page carried a digital watermark that would register as counterfeit in court. Watching him take them felt like watching gravity fulfill its function. Inevitable. Necessary. Neutral. He paused near the doorway, looking around the room as if sensing something had changed, but habit is a powerful blindfold. He zipped his bag, exhaled, and whispered, "Perfect," I whispered back from the hall, so softly that even the house couldn't hear it. Exactly. When the elevator doors closed, I locked the condo remotely. Within minutes, every system, lights, temperature, sound, froze in stasis. The home we'd shared had become a sealed archive. I sat down at my desk and began the countermeasure sequence. First, I composed a short message to Lydia. Subject has removed falsified documents. Proceed with filing. Then another to Reese. Trail active. Observe until 0500. Both replied within moments. Lydia's said, "Understood." Reese's read, "He won't know what hit him." At 11:20 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Reese's live update. Michael had stopped at an ATM, withdrawn $4,000, then driven north toward the interstate. His car's route data streamed across my monitor in real time, small glowing dots on a dark map. By midnight, he was at a motel outside Everett. I closed the laptop, powered down every system, and finally allowed myself a single breath. The counter move was complete. Legally, financially, logistically, he had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. The data was in motion. The case had begun. Tomorrow would bring the verification, the lawyers, the filings, the quiet storm that follows every pattern's collapse. But tonight the rain kept falling, steady and precise, like code compiling. I poured myself a glass of wine, raised it to the empty room, and whispered, "To transparency." The smart home sensors logged the sound at 0003 hours. Temperature 67.2 degrees, humidity 78%. Proof of life. Proof of closure beginning. Morning arrived colorless, the sky a seamless sheet of silver over Seattle. I woke before the alarm, already aware that the algorithm had reached its end. When I checked my phone, 2 messages waited. One from Lydia, one from Reese. Lydia's read, "Petition filed. Emergency hearing scheduled." Reese's contained a still frame from a highway camera. Michael's car pulled over at a rest stop, his face caught in the washed-out glow of a streetlight. He looked small, reduced to the size of the choices he had made. By noon, the narrative had moved from private to procedural. Lydia sat across from me in her office, papers spread like evidence in a forensic lab. "He's trying to liquidate holdings," she said, tapping the trust fund line on her tablet. But the injunction hit first. Accounts frozen. Condo secured. Her voice carried no triumph, only precision. "The court wants a statement on how you obtained the data." I met her gaze. "Honestly," I said, "by doing what I do best, verifying anomalies." She smiled faintly. "Then you'll be fine." The following week became a blur of signatures, affidavits, and quiet hearings. I never saw Michael until the preliminary session. He entered the courtroom immaculate, wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to our anniversary dinner the previous year. For a moment, memory tried to speak, but numbers drowned it out. Lydia laid the evidence before the judge. GPS coordinates, synchronized timestamps, expense statements, audio transcripts. Each piece aligned like coordinates on a map pointing to a single conclusion. Michael's lawyer attempted charm, questioning legality, suggesting obsession, but the documents told a cleaner story than either of us ever could. When the judge issued the temporary judgment, full control of assets to me pending final ruling, Michael's composure cracked. His jaw tightened, eyes flickered. He glanced at me once, as though searching for a version of the woman he'd known. But I had become something else entirely. Calm, exact, untouchable. That night, after the hearing, I walked through the condo in silence. The rooms felt hollow yet relieved, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath. I stood before the window overlooking the city and realized I had won without raising my voice. Victory in numbers, not volume. Yet the quiet didn't feel like joy. It felt like equilibrium restored after too much distortion. Then the backlash began. His family called first, his sister pleading, his mother weeping, his father furious. They said I was cruel, that marriages aren't equations to be solved. I listened to every word and said nothing. They spoke of forgiveness as though forgiveness were proof of intelligence. They didn't understand that forgiveness is only clean when truth has been accounted for. A week later, Michael tried to call. I let it ring until it stopped. The voicemail that followed was fragmented, anger breaking into apology, apology dissolving into accusation. "You set me up," he said. "You turned my life into data." He wasn't wrong. I replayed the message once, then forwarded it to Lydia. Her reply came in minutes. "Keep everything." Words are evidence. The final hearing came in early spring. Rain again, softer this time. Michael had no fight left, only exhaustion. The court finalized the divorce, reaffirmed the asset division, and closed the case under irreconcilable deception. Lydia shook my hand. "You did everything right," she said. "You turned pain into proof." I thanked her, though right didn't feel like relief. It felt like an ending disguised as logic. When I returned home, the condo was nearly empty. Boxes stacked, echoes stretching through the halls. The automation system greeted me one last time, its synthetic voice crisp and polite. "Welcome home, Sarah." I almost laughed at the irony. I walked to the control panel and executed the factory reset command. The lights dimmed, the systems powered down, and the voice fell silent. For the first time, the space belonged to no one. That night, I packed the last of my things. A few clothes, my laptop, the external drives that contained every receipt, every file, every digital heartbeat of the marriage that had failed. I slipped the keycard into an envelope marked "Return to Management," placed it on the counter, and stood for a long moment at the doorway. Behind me was evidence. Ahead of me, absence. Both felt honest. As dawn began to thin the clouds, I drove away from the tower that had once been my fortress of certainty. In the rearview mirror, the skyline blurred into a pale shimmer. I didn't cry. I just adjusted the mirrors, checked the mileage, and noted the distance. Old habits die in data. I left Seattle before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, skyscrapers blinking in slow succession like servers powering down one by one. The highway unfurled ahead of me in wet gray ribbons, and for the first time in years I didn't have a destination marked on any map. The GPS screen glowed blank. The system that had once betrayed me was silent now, its voice muted, obedient. I drove until the skyline disappeared behind mist, and all that remained was the hum of tires and the ocean's faint exhale somewhere beyond the fog. By noon, I reached the coast. The air smelled of rain and salt, sharp and clean, uncalculated. I parked near a stretch of cliffs where the Pacific broke itself against stone, constant and indifferent. Standing there, wind cutting through my coat, I felt the tension drain from my body like static leaving a circuit. Everything I had built, the proofs, the filings, the precise dismantling of betrayal, had served its purpose. Justice isn't dramatic. It's procedural, but healing, I was learning, isn't data. It has no metrics, no certainty, only motion. I rented a small cottage near the water, a single room with peeling white paint and windows that rattled when the wind rose. The landlord didn't ask questions. He handed me the key and said, "The sea's loud at night." I nodded. Noise was welcome. Silence had always been Michael's weapon. In the evenings, I walked along the shore, collecting driftwood and fragments of glass worn smooth by time. Each piece looked broken once, but the ocean had redefined it. I began to understand that survival isn't about avoiding fractures. It's about erosion, slow, patient reshaping. Days passed marked not by meetings or court filings, but by tides. I learned the rhythm of the waves the way I once learned code syntax. Repetition until understanding. Sometimes, when the wind died, I could hear faint echoes of the city in my head. The elevator chime of the condo, the hum of data feeds, the mechanical click of betrayal captured on a timestamp. But the sound faded faster each day, washed clean by distance. One evening, I sat on the porch with my laptop and opened a new document titled Post-Analysis. The cursor blinked against the empty page. For years, I had measured everything in risk percentages, failure probabilities, loss ratios. Now, I typed something different. Trust is not a variable to be calculated. It is a choice to be made once, consciously. I stared at the line for a long time before saving the file. It felt less like work and more like confession. A week later, I received an email from Lydia. Case officially closed. No pending appeals. Congratulations, Sarah. I read it twice, then deleted it. Closure doesn't need storage. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Future Projects. Inside, I placed nothing. The emptiness was deliberate, a blank dataset waiting to be filled by something that wasn't proof. As spring deepened, the ocean turned gentler. I began photographing the horizon at dawn, the light fracturing across the water in soft gradients of silver and blue. I told myself I was documenting patterns of weather, but it was simpler than that. I was reminding myself that change can be measured by beauty too, not just loss. One morning, while walking along the cliffs, I found a coin half buried in the sand, corroded but intact. I turned it over in my palm and thought of every transaction I had made in my life. Emotional, financial, moral. Every deal, every compromise, every risk. I slipped the coin into my pocket, a small receipt from the universe reminding me that not all value depreciates. When the sun began to set, painting the water with streaks of copper, I poured a cup of coffee, leaned against the railing, and listened to the wind moving through the pines behind the cottage. It sounded almost like breathing. I realized then that the story wasn't about betrayal or evidence or even victory. It was about reclamation, the slow, deliberate act of choosing peace after precision. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Goodbye, Michael." The word carried no anger, no triumph, only release. The sea answered with a rush of air through the rocks, a sound like applause fading into distance. As night fell, I turned off the lights, left the windows open, and let the ocean fill the room. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, the world continued in its quiet chaos of numbers and lies. But I had stepped outside the equation, and in that simple subtraction, one woman minus deceit, minus fear, minus noise, I found balance again. Not the engineered balance of algorithms, but the fragile humankind that can't be proven, only lived.